Hey Trey, how you doing, man?
Life is good. Life is good. I think things are opening up here, and we're getting visitors here left and right. It's Derby here in Kentucky next week, so all good.
Yes, it's a sign of Derby in Kentucky when you get snow on the ground.
Exactly.
70 one day, snow the next, and 70 again the day after that. So it's good.
Right.
Derby's right around the corner.
Yeah,
You know, it's shitty weather for everything except for aging bourbon.
true,
Exactly.
true. These are the good things. These spikes and up and down. Yeah, that's perfect. So
Trey is always the optimist. We love having him on here.
Yeah.
so Trey, as you can tell, audience, Trey's just a friend of the show. He's been on here many times. We've come and hung out there today. We're just doing a Zoom thing, but so we don't need to get into the background like we normally do, Trey. So let's just start out. Let's talk about your new product. What do you got going on here?
You got it. This is our first dry in 7 or 8 years.
Wow.
So, as I think you all know, we've had 21 different expressions of rye. 19 of those 21, we do something different besides distilling it, aging it, cutting it to proof, and bottling it. One of the 2 products that we had that we didn't do anything other than that was our 10-year-old rye. And unfortunately, everything else, we're either distilling, contract distilling, or sourcing. That rye, we were actually not buying by the barrels, but by the tanker. And unbeknownst to me, I thought we had a pretty good contract in getting our supply of rye. However, there was another brand that was getting the same rye. They were charging about twice as much for it. And lo and behold, we got cut off of buying any more of that rye. I was wondering how that happened. And it seems like the guy that was selling it to us became the CEO of the company that was also buying that rye and seemed to get a big supply of it after we got cut off. So I've been anxious to come out with a rye for some time. However, I didn't want to rush anything out. Wanted to have proper age on it. And I wanted to do something different as we, kind of live in pushing the maturation, or finishing or blending. I didn't want to just come out with a rye like we had previously. So what I wanted to do was make a real sipping rye. And I love ryes for what they bring to the table, that sharp spice that's up front, and then it gets dry and kind of shuts up and lets other components of the cocktail do its work. But I was trying to craft something that we could just sip. And I think what we've got is a great sipping whiskey right here. I chose to finish it in cognac barrels. We finished it up to 18 months. So we've taken mature rye, finished it for 18 months here in the hot boxes at Kentucky Artisan Distillery. And the reason that I picked cognac barrels is because I wanted to put more weight on it. Because as it gets dry, rye typically it's a little thinner. So bringing out some of the flavors and the texture of the cognac has really softened it. And I wouldn't say softened it, but just added other flavors to it that make it much more complex. So you still get that big punch of rye, but you get such great mouthfeel on it. And it's honey, which actually it almost feels like that honey's coating your tongue, and a lot of peaches and orange flavors that come out as well. So we had someone out here to the distillery yesterday that I gave a bottle to over the winter, the buyer from one of the big liquor chains. And he took a picture of it the next day, and about 3/4 of the bottle was gone. And he was, this is one of those bottles that I just couldn't put down. So
Yeah.
it's a great sipper. Really enjoyed it. Really pleased on how it came out.
Yeah, you talked to, the last time we spoke, you sort of alluded to this. We got to try a sample of it, and we were floored by it. We talked a little bit about this some more, and of course now it's out. And you said here, your goal was to create more of a sipping rye, and it seems like rye has an up and down. And here in Kentucky, it doesn't seem like rye gets a whole lot of love, but this is a stellar product. You talked a little bit about how you kind of landed on cognac, but kind of walk us through this process, because 18 months, especially when you're trying to come up with something you've been looking forward to, haven't done it in years, 18 months can be a really long time to wait to see how things turn out. So kind of walk us through that whole process and what that was like over the year and a half.
You got it. And I didn't really anticipate it being in the barrel for that long. Typically when I'm doing a release, I'm aging a few barrels, and we probably had a dozen different cognac barrels that we tried it out in, and we aged it over time before we decided to put down a commercial amount. So we had VSOP barrels, we had XO barrels, we had all different types of barrels. And what seemed to be the best, or what I enjoyed the most, were the smaller barrels, not the bigger 69 gallon plus barrels, because I think just more surface area touching the liquid really allowed that rye to come in, that cognac to come into the bourbon.
Mhm.
So we tried it out first with a smaller amount. And this is something that, it's something I wanted to do for some time, to try to bring in that sipping rye. So we tried it out a few different things. And the cognac really just gave so much. As I said, the weight on it is, to me, is really key. So
Yeah.
it's got great flavors, but it's just the texture of it just doesn't seem like a rye whiskey.
No.
You still get that punch from the rye, which I love, but it's just so more developed and complex than a typical.
Now, as you said, as a sipping rye, it's stellar. I mean, obviously, the kind of really kind of adds a great sort of finish towards it, and rounds out the entire whiskey. But I was, you gave us a sample of this. I've really enjoyed it, and as an experiment, I thought, you know what, I'm going to just add a little bit of bitters to this to see how it would be just as a more simplified Sazerac. And oh my God, it's amazing. Yeah.
But you know what? I haven't done that as of yet. But if I'm going to make a cocktail at all, that's pretty much the extent of my cocktail, is adding a little bitters into bourbon on the rocks.
Yeah. Well,
So-
as a Sazerac now, without having to add a cognac to it, you've got everything already there. You just add bitters and you're good to go. And it really is fabulous.
I didn't think about that. So what bitters did you use?
Just a Picard or Pichards.
Okay.
The Sazerac, the one you're supposed to use for a true Sazerac, but I mean, just add that and it's good to go.
All right. I'm going to give it a shot today.
There you go. Pro tip from Jeremy.
Pro tip.
Me with cocktails, the easier it is, the safer it's going to come out right.
Yeah.
So,
Well, I suck at making cocktails because I just don't very often. So they're going to think I'm Tom Cruise in cocktail today. I'm not going to show what's behind the scenes. I'm swirling some things and just take a little bitters in there and say, here you go.
hold on. Yeah. Use an empty bottle before you start twisting around, because you never know what's going on.
Yeah.
For sure. Absolutely.
So, when you started the company, it was you and your dad, and I'm sure the two of you, were the collaborators and the ones responsible for every facet of new products. Can you talk to us about how, things have changed since you're owned by Pernod Ricard now? And are there more individuals coming in to help with development, or is it still, pretty simple and keeping that a group of people pretty small?
Well, first, you're exactly right. We put almost everything together over the kitchen table or the kitchen island. We designed the bottle. Every product that we tasted, we'd sit down at the island and taste it together and decide what we wanted to do. When we first started blending, which I think was when we first bottled the blends up, was 2001.
Mm-hmm.
So, it was all done, the two of us there, as we batched up different products. It was he and I looking at each other and say, I think we got it here. Luckily, leading up to the acquisition by Pernod Ricard and then post-acquisition, the one thing that has been drilled down to me, which I love, is Trey, we want to keep you doing you, keep you very entrepreneurial and innovative.
That's
and we're trying to get out of the way. Now they're trying to get out of the way. And my definition of getting out of the way are two different things.
Yeah.
Legal is involved with everything.
Yeah.
That being said, everything that I've wanted to do, we're doing it.
Yeah.
It just takes a hell of a lot longer to get it done.
Yeah.
You got to check off a lot of boxes. A lot of people have to, but true to their word, they've stayed out of it quite a bit. Now, that being said, we've got more sensory labs and, there's more procedures and, we've got, everything that we're about to bottle, we're checking color and flavor. So it is much more buttoned up.
Yeah.
But which is just a positive.
Yeah.
So the negative in my mind is it just takes a lot longer for it to happen. But again, I've got two real big I think, kind of game-changing innovations coming in the next couple of years.
Ooh.
Wow. All right.
Really excited
Well, you
about
know
it.
where to come to talk about it.
Yeah. Well, I can't say what it is, but I will say, if you've looked what I've done over the past 24 years, it's kind of a culmination of everything that I've done that has led me to where specifically one of these
This is
is.
your opus.
There you go. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's very different than with anything that's been done, and I think it kind of can lead to the next step of where where whiskeys can be. So hopefully it's going to turn out as well as I think it is. The
No doubt
experiment
about that.
done to date has been great, and just makes sense in what I've been doing for the last couple of decades. So from the initial time that I introduced that to the people at Pernod, and the executive team loved it, to when we were able to get everything signed up, everything done, took in my mind, a long time.
Yeah.
It seems like you've learned how to play the game, though. I mean, obviously, if you do
Yeah.
it longer, you introduce it sooner, and that way you sort of ride it out and let things happen. And
I don't know that I've learned how to play the game. I think people scratch their head at me, and I probably piss a lot of people off. But I'm very frank and direct. They're going, well, this is not exactly how we do it. So, but as the CEO said, I don't want you to be Pernod Ricardized. And I've taken that to heart, and I push back when they start pushing. So we'll see.
Let Trey be Trey.
At the end of the day,
Yeah.
now we've got the resources and the machine behind us that can really take us to a next level. As we said before the call, I was on the Georgia coast last week and filming something on the O-Search that is going to allow us to something that I never had the resources to do previously, that we're able to go ahead and tap into, which is
It's exciting.
for me.
Yeah. So, you're known for your innovation and creativity, and not every attempt can be a winner. We know that you've done a lot of checking on what's going on and what's happening on the shelves at liquor stores. Can you give us some examples of things you tried that, didn't work?
There's been a lot. I would say, and I was so excited. I went down with John Besh, and he and I, we took our barrels on one of the legs from New Orleans down to Key West, the Jefferson's journey, and had a great time. And he was talking about his good friends over at Tabasco. And so he and I took a trip to
Avery Island.
Yeah. Which, if you've never been, it's the coolest place in the United States.
It is cool.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think it's 8 generations of McElhenney's that have owned it. People who have been working. You can only live on the island if you work there. And there's 6 generations of people that have been working there, living on the island. The history is amazing. And it is, except for the distillation, it is almost the exact same process as making bourbon.
Oh.
And it takes about just as long, from the time that they start with their Tabasco and fermenting it and aging it, it's years. And who knew, but they age Tabasco and use bourbon barrels. So they basically prepare their own coopers in a sense. So they've had barrels for 40, 50 years that they keep aging Tabasco in over and over. So I got a couple barrels from them, filled it up with some mature bourbon. First shot, this was 40-year-old plus barrels. First pour in there, leaked right through. We captured it up in a tank, put it back in there, leaked it through again. By the third fill, it had swollen enough that it held it. And just what it passed through, blow your head off. So I thought it might add a little nice spice, but it was pretty rank at the end of the day.
Huh.
Something with tobacco staves or tobacco sticks, basically,
Yeah.
that these sticks have been used over 75 years. And you put the tobacco stock on it and then nail it up onto the tobacco barn to cure. And those sticks had picked up a hell of a tobacco scent and flavor. So I put those in. And it actually came out with a really nice tobacco flavor. However, by doing a little lab work on it, there were some carcinogens that came out as well.
Oh,
So,
ouch.
yeah, that was something that didn't work out as well.
Yeah.
No, no.
No.
I
I actually
did-
quite like the taste of tobacco in bourbon. If someone asked me if I'd like an old fashioned, I always ask, do you have tobacco bitters? I really enjoy that. I think they complement each other quite well.
Well, if you ever get out of Canada and come down to see us, I've got some of this bourbon around.
Oh
Partially bottled it, and I don't think a little bit's going to hurt you.
no, I'm Canadian. If anything, we're resilient.
Exactly. So it really, it's got a great flavor to
Oh yeah, it does sound
Just
actually quite delicious.
it.
I see something with cannabis happening in the future at some point, I think.
Oh yeah.
Trey's like, I got nothing to say on that one.
Yeah.
Hmm.
His
I will-
opus. Remember, his opus is coming.
We'll say that this is something that I've dabbled with at some point in time. I don't know that Pernod would be behind that or not. So, but I know how to do it. Let's just say that.
Oh, excellent.
You're about a 20-minute drive north of me. I'll see you in a bit. So
It's
Trey,
not on.
I don't
Exactly. I've got something in a state where it's legal.
okay.
So
Well, all I'm saying is it's legal in Canada, so
well, we've got that's international borders. I don't know how to get across those yet, but
yeah,
I
it'll
think they would
happen.
classify that as a Canadian whiskey at that point, so maybe it would be all right.
Yeah, it would be, right?
who knows? I did some experiments for our wood experiment pack. Actually, back in 2012, we started with that, where I did 4 different variables. Basically, I became a bourbon or barrel chef for Independence Day for a couple of days, and which means I basically followed a computer screen tracking time and temperature, or either threw on more to a fire or sprayed it down to stay within these parameters that would bring out certain flavors. And I saw what techniques that they were using in their cooperages all around the world for different wines and spirits. And I thought, why are we so rudimentary in bourbon that we're not taking advantage of some of these techniques that have been developed? So I started experimenting first with 13 different barrels that were either wine barrels with whiskey heads, or bourbon barrels with wine heads, or staves that have been slow cooked or seared to bring out different flavors. And 4 different variables we put in different ways. And I tried those barrels once a month for 36 months and kind of charted and watched how they progressed. And I had one specifically that after 60 days tastes like a Werther's candy. It was a butterscotch bar. It was so damn good. I was like, man, if this is good at 60 days, it's going to be incredible at 90 days. I went to taste it at 90 days and it totally turned to taste like greenwood.
Oh.
So, and you see that in a lot of this, everything's got an apex, and then you start getting diminishing returns. Some just sucked from the beginning. Some of them got better and better and better. Some of them would get better, then worse, then better again. So time and temperature makes a big difference. And especially when we're doing some finishings and different agings, depending on what time of year, whether it's the spring or the fall. So going into the winter months or the summer months makes one huge difference. So you can't just base it on what you've done before unless you're doing it in the similar type of seasons. So, that's the great thing about maturation in my mind. So, distillation to me is kind of a science that's been perfected over time. Maturation, there's so many different variables that make it an art of how you put it together at the end. That's why we had no idea that this would be an up to 18-month finish on this, but it worked. So
I think that's a great point because, everyone talks about maturation and how the wood, contributes so much towards the outcome of the flavor. But to your point, obviously depending upon the time of year that you start and you let it age, but ultimately Mother Nature controls everything because if you go from year to year to year, the same seasons aren't always the same. The temperatures aren't always the same. The humidity, the pressure, the barometric pressure, all that shifts every single year. And unless you are being that anal to document day by day by day at the barrel level, it's nearly impossible to reproduce the same experiment.
even if you were, documented, you can't reproduce that.
Yeah, you can't control what Mother Nature does.
Right, exactly. Yeah, so there's so many different variables, and that's to me why I started doing what I'm doing. All the distillers, when I started buying from them, would tell me the same thing. Approximately 65 to 80% of what bourbon is, or the heart and soul of bourbon, comes from the maturation process. But at the time, I looked at it, and everybody was maturing the exact same way.
Mhm.
And I looked back in history to see why they're aging it that way, and it was all because of practicality. So it was just kind of questioning, what if we did this? How would that tweak it one way or the other?
Anybody that follows you, whether it be on social media or knows you in person, it knows that you're not someone who sits still for very long. You're pretty active. You do stuff constantly, and obviously with and you've alluded to some things down the road that obviously you're probably not going to give us a whole lot more information about, although it's just the four of us. So please feel free to spill if you want. But really the question I've got with this is, given the amount of time these experiments take and the amount of, successes versus percentages of ones that aren't quite as successful, for you, where does this inspiration for these different experiments come from?
Two things. One, as I just jokingly said, ADD, and that's it, because I like a lot of things going on. Doing the same thing over and over doesn't really interest me. I do like to try to perfect things over time. So, hopefully the next bottling of this is going to be even better, because you learn each time, and hopefully you take what you learned and you're able to build on that. And then, I started, it's almost 25 years ago, and I started at a time when bourbon was in a 30-year decline, and I wasn't going to distill Jimmy Russell. Mm-hmm. So I had to do something unique and different, and maturation is where I really thought that I could make a difference, or that's where I wanted to play in it. So I've had hundreds of different experiments going on over the last couple of decades, which allows me the opportunity. If one doesn't work or a lot of them don't work, okay, that's fine. I don't have to push anything out, because there's a lot being done and they're continuing to develop. And then I always say, I'm not going to develop anything out of the boardroom. Everything that we've done, all the collaborations, it's all been sitting in a bar somewhere or having a drink with somebody, and the conversation sparks creativeness, or we don't even realize it's being creative. It's just, what if? How can this, it's a conversation. I've had some things that I've worked with people, and it's like a zipper, something will come up and say, well, I would love to do this, but you can't do that. And I said, well, what if we did it and tweaked it this way? And then all of a sudden things come together so quickly, like, yeah, it's right there. So, to me, it's about working with fun people and pushing what bourbon can be in an organic way, and not trying to shove a square peg in a round hole.
Yeah.
So not sitting out whiteboarding it and saying, we need to do this because data shows that Apple is selling really well this year. It's more having fun with it. Mm-hmm. And I think the more fun you have with it, the more people enjoy it, and the more that they want to be a part of it.
Yeah.
Agreed.
With that, I just want to follow up with this, because obviously, as you said, ADD, certainly you're jumping from one thing to another. And obviously you'd like to stay, busy and looking for something that you're going to enjoy and be passionate about. For people getting into the industry today, what kind of advice would you have for them just to be patient? Because time ultimately is what you got to spend.
Yeah, gosh, you look at the business model that most people are doing with craft distilleries. I couldn't figure that out. I couldn't, I wanted to build a distillery as soon as we could. But it took 15 years for us to be able to do that. Here's what it is. First, the cheapest thing that you do is build a distillery. The next least inexpensive thing that you do is lay down enough bourbon or whiskey or whatever you're doing. So once it comes of age, you've got enough product to sell. And don't sell it early, because young whiskey is young whiskey. I don't care what you do with it. Everybody's tried everything in the world. I've read a couple of articles that say that we've had as much success as anybody accelerating maturation through our ocean aging process. But, still, we use 6 to 8 year old bourbon before we put it on the seas. And then your biggest expense of sales and marketing. And unless you understand that, you got to, there are big companies that we are now part of. You can't imagine how much not only money that they have behind them, but influence with distributors and retailers. And you've got to be, build it and they will come works. Everybody likes to support their local brewery or distillery, but to push it out further than that, you got to have the resources that would allow you to do that.
Yeah.
And then put out young whiskey, at a higher price. People will buy it once, they'll gift it here or there, but they're not going to go back to it. There's too much great whiskey out that has been properly aged.
Yeah. Trey, we talked before we even got started about getting older, aches and pains, all those type of things. during our on-air discussion, we've talked about a career span in 25 years now, great success, a lot of cool things you've done. As you begin to factor those things together and put them together, you start thinking about legacy in this business. And where do you think your legacy falls in the bourbon industry?
I still think of myself as a young guy out there, as I wasn't. Hard to believe that. I don't know, legacy. To me, part of the best part of the legacy that I've had is the opportunity to work with my dad early on.
Yeah.
That was something that I hope everybody gets the opportunity to do at some point in their life. I think it was really cool that we started this together and not like going into a business that he had started, because it, made it a totally different relationship. We were both learning at the same time, and being in this industry, so much fun. We've been able to travel the world together and meet incredible people. I've got twins that are 16. If they ever wanted to get in the industry, I would love for them to.
Well, I was going to ask that because, they're obviously not of legal drinking age yet, but do either of them show interest at all?
A little bit. They're going to be working out in the distillery this summer.
Oh, that's cool. I think that's great.
Yeah, they'll be pushing barrels around. What they're really going to be doing is spraying down warehouses of black mold. So,
yeah, they may not be too interested after a while.
Yeah.
But I am going to get a morning with our head distiller, Jade Peterson, every week, just to get them exposed to it and around it, just to see. Luckily, they hate the smell of bourbon.
Yeah.
They don't like it. And I say luckily, I've got more samples laying around my house. And I haven't noticed any of them disappearing yet, but
Yeah.
Who knows, that its time will come, I'm sure. But that would be a fun thing if they wanted to get involved.
Yeah.
Yeah.
but who knows? As far as, I think the maturation and, I had to be innovative when I started because, I couldn't if I did everything that, the same thing that the big eight that were around at the time were doing, I couldn't compete with them as far as cost, and, distribution muscle, everything else. So I had to be unique. So I don't know. I guess it's more up to you guys. What do you think my legacy is?
Yeah, I think self-evaluation is the hardest thing on legacies. I agree. So I could see why you'd struggle with that. But I have to tell you that your legacy is solid in this industry.
Yeah.
And I don't know that you really at this point get the credit you deserve, but you should. The things that you do, we see Big Bourbon copying off of that. That's the greatest flattery there is, when Big Bourbon takes notice of what you're doing and starts doing it themselves. Probably sucks when for you as a person, because you're like, I was doing this.
Yeah.
Why are they doing this now? Why are they jumping on my game? But that happens. And then of course the other thing is, what do individuals think? And you made such a huge difference. I mean, so many companies now, the way they start is they source bourbon, but they add some value to it, something different to make it their own, as opposed to just buying from MGP, putting it in a bottle and selling it. And really, you're the one who laid the tracks for that. They're just following along with what you did when you started Jefferson. So I mean, I think you have a very solid legacy in this, and I hope that it continues to rise. Your name comes up, and you should eventually be in the Kentucky Bourbon Hall of Fame. You've done this all in the great state of Kentucky, and you've changed the industry. That to me is a Hall of Famer, and I think that's where that's where you belong. That's your legacy.
Well, awful kind words. Thank you. Appreciate that.
Absolutely, my friend. On that, I think you've got a great new product. Jefferson's continues to have great new offerings. People want to follow the journey. What's the easiest way to do that, Trey?
You can jump on any of our social handles at Jefferson Bourbon, jeffersonbourbon.com, our website. We're putting together a documentary right now that should be living there soon. You can follow our voyages on the website, Instagram, Facebook, all that good stuff. So we're starting to really pump out some content now that I'm excited about.
Good deal. Well, stop by anytime. We'd love to talk to you. As you know, you got something going on. We'll call you from time to time, but don't hesitate to call us. We'd love to have you on anytime you'd like to talk.
I will do it, and I look forward to finally someday getting down and playing poker with you.
Playing some cards, man. Yeah, you can't quit. You got to quit dodging us. So yeah.
Well, you know what? I've got 2 more years of kids in the house, and once those guys are out, that it's going to free up a lot of time.
Yeah. I tell you, as a father of a 19-year-old, it doesn't change. They're still just as needy and still just as emotional, which isn't a bad thing.
Yeah, that's true.
Gone.
Yeah.
Wow,
Take care. Yeah. Take care, Trey. Thanks again for stopping by.
Steve, Jeremy, Renee, thanks a lot. I appreciate it. Love hanging out with you guys.
All right. Take care.
Thanks, Trey.
Bye-bye.
Oh, that was great.